Hey, folks, welcome into the Bleacher Nation Cubs podcast. I am Brett Taylor, joined by Michael Cerami and, backwards point. There we go, Baby Yoda. See, that's why you have to watch on YouTube so you get to see the props that we, artfully set up behind us.
How do you feel about Baby Yoda's name, Grogu? I feel like they kind of nailed that.
I know.
But people still
like
call him
it?
Baby Yoda.
Well,
yeah, I think it's a great name.
Oh, I'm not a fan. I remember when I first heard it, I thought it was a joke. I thought, oh, that's funny. No, that's really his name. No, I mean, I'm not that.
I thought it was appropriately unique in that they didn't go with something like lame, like John.
John Yoda. John Yoda.
Or something like that. Anyway.
There's no transition.
Said we weren't going to do this in this
our
podcast.
sponsor.
We're supposed to talk about baseball.
We're just supposed to talk Cubs. This is a Cubs podcast. It is brought to you by Ankin Law, Injury Law Made Personal. And you can get them at 312-6million. Or if you are watching because you want to see Grogu, you can scan the QR code there at the YouTube page. We appreciate Howard and his sponsorship. I wonder how he feels about Grogu versus Baby Yoda. Another day, perhaps. So here to talk Cubs baseball. We're going to talk about the week that was, a couple prospect things we want to get into, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't note here at the top, we're recording this the Thursday morning before the series finale against the Pirates. That means it was right after what happened in Wednesday night's game. For those that don't know, a fan in the seventh inning, as play was going on, fell from the outfield wall at PNC. Ultimately the fan hit the warning track, did not move, was taken off by stretcher. And as far as we know, as of this moment of recording, is in the hospital, critical condition. And, our thoughts, our sincerest well wishes go out to that fan and his family and friends, and can only hope for a positive outcome. I think it's notable in advance of the series finale, in particular, because clearly the players were affected. Cubs players took a knee. Pirates players were. It was all very. It's one thing to note that this has happened before in sports, but it's not as though it's some kind of occurrence that you can incorporate as part of your routine. I remember having this conversation when Albert Almora hit the foul ball that hit the young girl in Houston.
Oh, man.
And there is no transition from it. And I honestly understand for the players and the coaches that it has to be immensely difficult to focus on. It is your job, and the games are important in some limited sense, but you're confronted by a very real world, scary, sad, troubling thing that I think has to be given its appropriate weight. And so I wanted to make sure we mentioned that at the top before we talk about this silly game that we love and that we cover.
Mm-hmm. All done.
So hopefully there's good news on that front by the time you're listening to this. And either way, again, just the most positive wishes we can send out to that fan and the family and to anyone who was affected by that, because I imagine it was traumatizing for a lot of people. That game, it was actually at that moment is when the Cubs lost that game. It was a dribbler up the middle. Andrew McCutcheon caromed off of Dansby Swanson's glove. It was kind of a no man's land dribbler that then ultimately scored runners from first and second, which, that doesn't happen on a dribbler up the middle. Very unfortunate way to lose. It immediately became unimportant in the context of what had just happened in the outfield, but it does mean that the Cubs go into the finale today, potentially, going to lose this series to the Pirates. That could happen. They're facing Paul Skeens.
No. What's going to happen is people are going to be listening and be like, man, these guys didn't know that they lit up Paul Skeens out after 2 1/3 inning, 4 runs, his first 4-walk game of the year. And
wow.
2 homers.
All in your shot.
Man, poor Brett and Michael. They didn't know that they were going to have such good times ahead of them.
And Colin Ray threw a no-hitter. No-hitter.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
No-hitter. Insane.
So obviously we can't know for sure what's going to happen in that game, but we can comment upon the week that was. And then the Cubs lost the series to the Phillies, closing out the brutal stretch. Now, I've almost caught myself being reminded that, setting aside even this Pirates series, the Cubs actually still have 2 more weeks of very tough matchups from here. They get the Giants, they get the Mets, they get the Brewers in Milwaukee.
So infinitely more worried about the Giants series than the Mets, even though the Mets are like drawing all of the praise of being because I'm not trying to make it only about this, but they had literally the weakest schedule in base. They had the exact opposite of the Cubs, the actual weakest set of opponents.
Have you seen
all
the headlines?
You're like, well, they've won a lot of games.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah.
Well, their pitching rates out as like the best in baseball, and there's all these think pieces being written about, wow, what a genius way they constructed because remember, sort of famously, the Mets went out and got Juan Soto, and they have a good lineup, and then they didn't really address their pitching at all. And now it's like, what geniuses, they did this and they did this, and it was so smart. And it's like, maybe, but how about they face, like, for example, the Cubs, and we'll see what exactly that pitching does. But circling back to the Cubs, you could call this past week the first thing approximating a lull in the season for the Cubs, having lost 3 or 4. And I don't know. I feel, I don't know how you feel about it, Michael, but it doesn't, to me at this moment, even it could get worse from here. It just doesn't have that same feel of like, oh, this is where the rug gets pulled out, like last May. In part because I think this team is better than last year, in large part because of the teams against whom they've been doing what they've been doing. And then in third part, because it hasn't been fluky. Like the way that they have won games and the way the statistics are borne out, this has actually been a good team performing very well, translating to wins. And so if they go through a losing stretch, then that's just part of the 162 games.
Well, so I do agree, but I want to tell you something that immediately struck me because I had the same feeling last year. So last season, 2024, Cubs got off to a pretty good start also earlier in the year. They had a good little run, and they got up in the standings relative to themselves over 500. And I remember when the losing started, I had this feeling of like, wow. And this exact thought, because I'm the same person and I didn't remember that I thought this until I had the thought hit me. And I was like, oh God, it's great to have like a good team because, you built a little cushion and you lose a little bit and you go, that's all right. Like it's fine.
Sure,
and then
I remember that.
They just kept losing and they just kept losing and losing and losing. And it spiraled from there. I don't think that's going to happen with the Cubs. However, I did have that same initial reaction that you described and what I just described, in that I was like, yeah, I mean, okay, they lost this, but now I'm a little guarded against that because I'm like, well, you can't always think it's going to bounce back. And I will add that losing 3 games because of third base, like specifically, has been like, well, I mean, I was transitioning, but I also mean it sincerely. That is like, it is the clear hole right now. And it has directly led to multiple losses. One of the games I remember, it was, I want to say Workman, they had the air and they ended up winning, but they were part of the reason the Cubs had to come back late was because of an error at third. And it's like, how many times is that going to happen?
I mean, you could argue
much more probably.
Yeah. Well, you could argue 2 of the 3 losses during this 3 of 4 were, you had Brujan backing up on that one and Trey Turner and double pumping. And again, that one, listen, Julian Merriweather walked 3. Like, that's the bigger thing. And we don't know for sure that if Brujan had charged it, that he would have completed the play. Like, and they had already scored the one free runner, so maybe it wouldn't have mattered because the Cubs didn't score.
Maybe don't charge it, but don't double pump.
Oh, I mean, he was toast. Once he took a step back, he was toast anyway. That said, I don't know. Maybe Matt Shaw makes that play. Just saying. And then you had John Birdie kicking one that was preceded the win last night. And so I think it's going to continue to be an issue. I think,
and again, Workman had several before he was.
Did you see he booted one in his first?
He did. I mean, yeah, it's incredible.
First game with White Sox, he booted. I don't understand. He was
Is this the yips? Does he have the yips?
I'm not. Listen, I'm not gonna go
Put
there
that evil
because
on him.
of course, yeah, I'm not going to do the psychological digging on that, but like it had occurred to me that like if it's the one thing you're supposed to be very good at and you start making mistakes, again, we've covered this before. I'm a pretty soft person, but so I might not be reflective of the average major leaguer, but it would get in my head. It would absolutely get in my head. Okay, so Workman is one third base that didn't work out. Shaw was, of course, the first one that sort of didn't work out with an asterisk. I think Brujan is best used as a utility guy. John Birdie's best used as a utility guy. And the Cubs are just going to have to make do until they feel Matt Shaw is ready to come back up, or until some veteran hits waivers or is cheaply available. I'm sure they are scouring that area right now. You're not going to make a major trade for a third baseman, on May 1st, but I wouldn't be at all
maybe
shocked.
ever with Matt Shaw, though.
Yeah,
right?
or maybe ever. Right.
Because
the best outcome isn't the best outcome. Matt Shaw turns it on for a month. There are adjustments that we see. Okay, he's ready to face big league pitching again. And then he comes up and he's the guy the rest of the year and hits. He could even be below average offensively.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if he's like a 90 weighted runs created plus and good defense with good base running, that's more than enough. He could be the Cubs' worst hitter and a steady defender. But I do want to talk about Matt Shaw. And this is why we sort of teed this up, because I had an article on Bleacher Nation yesterday talking about sort of, we had a really hot last few games, and from afar, just looking at the box score, looking at tweets, you're like, whoa, here we go. Matt Shaw heating up. But it's not quite as optimistic as it would look. I'm not going to, and I bring this up in the article many times for those that are thinking I'm being overly pessimistic. You shouldn't get penalized for having good games, or for having balls find grass, or for playing against the minor league defense that might not defend against your balls in play as well as major league defense would. It was 4-hit night the other night. Maybe 2 of those are hits in the big leagues, not 4 for sure. But that's sort of besides the point, because we learned a couple things. So this quote actually came out via Jordan Bastian, Cubs.com writer, back when Matt Shaw was first demoted. And it was a really important piece of information that we kind of both missed. And I wanted to write about it, and I want to talk about it now. And it's that over the offseason, Shaw started tweaking his swing to start his timing sooner. And the reason for that was in anticipation of preempting the higher velocities he was expecting to see in Major League Baseball. Now, what happened because of that, and my guess, and based on the data, is that he started, let me get the exact, I think I have the exact numbers here. So there's a ton of weak contact. Obviously, we know that 82.7 mile per hour average exit velocity, which was the second worst in Major League Baseball while he was playing. 2.5% barrel rate, 22.5% hard hit rate, which is the 6th lowest. And part of that is because he was swinging at fewer pitches in the zone and making more contact on pitches out of the zone. Those are 2 glaring red flags to making more weak contact. And so if you think about it logically, it makes a lot of sense, right? You start your swing earlier, so you're just deciding to swing sooner than you would have otherwise. That's going to make you miss more often. But when you have elite contact skills, or very good contact skills like Matt Shaw has sort of demonstrated, you're still able to put the bat in the ball. It's just weak contact, and that's not good. So when I go back and look at his batted balls over these last 4 games, in which he has had excellent numbers and barely striking out, I start to realize that, as a matter of fact, there are not a lot of hard hit balls or hard hit balls in the air. 5 of the 16 balls he put in play qualified as hard contact. That's only 31.2%. And the average exit velocity, only 86.9 miles per hour. In the big leagues, the average big league hitter has a 40% hard hit rate and an 89.4 mile per hour average exit velocity. So when all of your hard contact is going into the ground, or you're otherwise not making hard contact, and the one thing you are there to work on is making hard contact, even at the expense of more strikeouts, I don't want to see a bunch of singles and bloop hits with a 2.7% strikeout rate or a 4% strikeout rate. Like, that's not what we want to see, even though in isolation, it sounds really positive. So I was curious what you think about how it's going. Do you sort of you sort of put it against him that this is the way it's played out? Or do you think it's just, listen, it's a small sample and he's performing, he's getting results? Like, how are you taking in this whole stretch and the tweaks he's making?
Yeah, I mean, it was heartening, I think, to learn of what the potential tweak was coming into the season and then sort of going back on it. I always like to at least know that there's something concrete, that it isn't just that a guy came up and his skill set doesn't translate against big league pitching. Like, that's what you're always afraid of as guys rise through the ranks. And so it's, generally speaking, I like to know when that's not the case. Didn't think that was the case with Matt Shaw, but sometimes you don't know. And I will concede that his strikeout rate being so ungodly low at AAA since he returned there is actually modestly concerning to me.
Right.
Because, in a vacuum, of course, fewer strikeouts is better, right? But it's basically almost no player is going to be the most productive version of themselves striking out 4% of the time, because that means you are optimizing contact to an extreme degree over your best contact.
Yeah,
and that doesn't seem
swing
to
harder.
Just swing harder.
You should be swinging out your shoes more.
Right. And so some of that is pitch selection. Some of that is mental. Some of it is triggering your swing. Some of it is, it's a million different things that it could potentially be for an individual player. And so I'm not a swing mechanic, so I can't offer folks much on that. I know that people will talk about the huge leg kick. I don't know. For me, for right now, I'm not going to pin anything on that. And so ultimately I rest mostly on the sample. The games Michael's talking about where he's been hot, it's like 3 games. So you wouldn't credit that. Like, if a guy had 3 hot games, you wouldn't be like, dude, it's great. Oh, 4. He's flashing me 4.
4 games.
You need the Tom Brady.
Now it's
Tom Brady
it's a significant sample.
Now, that's right. It takes from 3 to 4. So, we wouldn't be saying, oh, he's definitely ready if it was 4 games worth of amazing contact. So I'm not going to take 4 games and say, he's cooked, because he's pounding it into the ground. And I think,
but wouldn't you be so much more optimistic if he had went 0 for 20 with, I'm doing the extreme version of nothing but 100-mile-per-hour lineouts or deep fly balls that are all,
sure.
It's like it's development for him right now. It's not results right now. And it's back to practicing.
Right.
And so what is resulting is not what we actually want to see. You know what I mean? Like, his slash line is irrelevant because we are more capable of looking beyond that with the attendant advanced analytics that are now available StatCast in AAA that weren't there previously. So it's like, I don't know. We have to level up our analysis of what's going on.
Yeah, and because we know we're not just following a prospect. We have seen him in the big leagues. We know potentially what some of the issues are. And so that's the lens through which we're looking at this chunk of time when he's at AAA. And that goes to what I was going to say, which is that the important thing, I think, for fans to take away from this time for Shaw is that he does still need time. Like, for as much as we are going to look at third base on the big league team, obsess about it, fixate on it, be troubled by it, it is not yet going to be worthwhile looking just at Matt Shaw's slash line at AAA and be like, oh, he's ready to come back and be the guy. Because now you're in a window of 2 issues. One, that may not be the case, as we've just discussed. His results may not quite be reflective of the kinds of improvements that we would want to see. And 2, you bring him back up too soon and you can create a little bit of a yo-yo problem for a guy who could otherwise be developing. And so it's not a knock against him as a prospect. I don't think there's a fundamental change in the thinking of what he can be long-term. And I don't think it's ruled out that he could contribute meaningfully to this team this year at the big league level. It's just that it's not right now. It's just not right now, as much as we would want it to be, because again, third base is a problem. The Cubs are starting Nicky Lopez there today, the guy they just picked up off of, the Angels let him go because they have no other choice. So let's leave that. Sure. Let's go to the other sort of AAA adjacent to the big leagues conversation that a lot of folks want to have. Craig Counsell's been asked about it multiple times this week for completely legitimate reasons. Okay. The Cubs have, you may have heard, it's a little prospect at AAA, Moises Ballesteros, who is 21. He's one of the youngest players at AAA, and he is on a 16-game hitting streak. He just homered twice. His numbers are I just wrote about this earlier today at Bleacher Nation. His numbers they're in the silly zone. It's not just that his results are amazing. It's that, he's not striking out and yet is making the kind of extreme great contact that you would want to see.
It's bonkers. It doesn't even make sense.
You just don't. It doesn't make sense.
If he was 24 years old, I'd be like, wow, incredible.
Yes, that is exactly right. Exactly.
If
he were a 24-year-old bat only DH, we'd be like, yo, he's doing some things that guys don't do. And so that lends itself.
Wait. Just pause right there for a second. I actually want to linger on this. I feel as though we fully internalize this, but not everyone appreciates how important age to level is in evaluating a prospect. I mean, he's so young. He is one of the youngest players at this level, playing against people with so much more experience than him. It is not. It is very significant, very important,
and it's just particularly at AAA, where you have half of the league's pitchers are veterans who have been working on their craft for so long, they're not just developing, they are specifically gaming to get hitters out. Like, it's a little different. You might face better pitching prospects in high A and double A sometimes, but you're not going to face more polished pitchers than at AAA.
Those are half of the guys are guys that are just shuttle pitchers that are going to play half their season in the big leagues and expect to have significant, contributions. That's why it's incredible what he's doing. Incredible.
And so because of that, because the Cubs are competitive this year, you would always look at a situation like this and say, okay, when's it time to get this bat up? And when's he going to contribute? And 99 times out of 100, you would say, who cares? Figure it out. Just make it happen. It's going to happen. And that may still be the case a month from now. Okay. It's typically, you see the May to June window is when teams will be like, okay, we've seen 100, 150 plate appearances from this guy. It's time. The problem with respect to Moises Ballesteros, and Craig Counsell said this each time when he's asked about this, is you've got two main factors that are limiting the ability to bring Moises up. The places where you could put him: catcher, DH, first base, and first base is a stretch. The Cubs have permanent starters who are raking. Michael Busch is raking. Seiya Suzuki is raking. Carson Kelly is raking. Miguel Amaya, maybe I wouldn't say raking, but he's hitting like 20% above league average.
Yeah,
and he's an established big league catcher. And Carson Kelly is too, has already been working with this staff that's having a very good season. You would not want to disrupt that. Okay. So your only option would be to bring him up, park him on the bench, and have him hit as often as Justin Turner does. Okay. And I don't think anyone, because that's thing two, I don't think anyone wants to do anything to diminish the development experience that Moises is getting at AAA behind the plate. Because of course, if he's going to be this caliber of hitter, if he can catch half the time, even if you have to wait into next year, it's just unbelievably valuable. And you'd figure out the Carson Kelly, Miguel Amaya stuff then, because you'd have an off season to transition. And so for now, for me, you hope he keeps doing what he's doing. You hope he, most importantly, keeps developing behind the plate. And then if there's an injury to Seiya or Carson Kelly or Miguel Amaya, maybe Michael Busch, I think that's less likely. But if there's an injury in one of those three, I now think maybe we've gotten to the point, and this wouldn't have been the case 2 weeks ago. I think maybe we've gotten to the point where the Cubs would say, okay, call up Moises, instead of like, they've Reese McGuire down there, they've got veterans that they could. So that's right. That's where I land.
Let me throw this at you though too. So it's because it's interesting. So let's say there's not an injury, because I agree that I think that like injury is going to be the path for him this year, which sucks, but it's kind of just the reality. It's almost absurd to me, because I would put Matt Shaw is theoretically the better, more well-regarded prospect. We'll see where that all shakes out, come midseason updates, I guess. Or if he graduates, but the reason Matt Shaw is at AAA right now and not in the big leagues is that even though he would probably make the Cubs better just by steadier defense at third base right now, it would definitely harm his long-term development. However, I think that I'm guessing genuinely, no matter what, unless Matt Shaw is doing horribly, truly, he's back up with the Cubs in 2 months because they will at that point say, we need to start prioritizing 2025.
Sure.
And Matt Shaw helps us win. Moises Ballesteros is showing me a level of hitting such that it's actually almost possible to trump whatever 2025 value he can add by letting him develop into and that's crazy to me because I won't make that argument for Matt Shaw. For Matt Shaw, by July, if the Cubs third base situation looks like this and he is fine at AAA, he needs to be on the big league team. Moises Ballesteros, I'm like, I don't know. I think that he could be like a superstar caliber bat, not player overall, because we'll see what happens if he's a catcher or just a DH or whatever. And I kind of think they need to let that game out and keep the long term in mind for him in a way that they don't necessarily for Matt Shaw. So, I mean, like, do you see what I'm saying there? Does that resonate with you?
It's an irony. Yeah, it's funny. It's like he's almost too good to try to figure out how he could minimally impact this year's team. No, I totally buy that. And I think we don't know entirely how the organization views his catching ability right now. I think that's probably a big question. So I guess that would be the question if there were an injury. You know, if Miguel Amaya or Carson Kelly were to get hurt and Moises did not come up, it's a pretty good bet that they feel like he's simply not ready to catch big league pitching and catching big league games. Because we have seen young guys, this going back, we have seen young catchers come up and they can look exposed. Like there is the transition between AAA and the big leagues isn't just the pitchers you're facing when you're trying to hit. It's the pitchers you're facing when you're trying to catch. And it's a bigger difference because there's nastier stuff. There's guys who are very established, set in their ways that have been working with certain catchers for a long time. And like, that is a steep additional learning curve, which, by the way, is just an additional feather in Moises' cap that he's working so hard to develop as a catcher. And he's the best. He's performing the best at the best age that I can remember seeing in a long time. And that there are some very good prospects who've come through the Cubs system in the last 10 years. So yeah, I get your point. And I think that ultimately it will, whatever the Cubs do is probably going to tell us as much about Moises as the other way around. And yeah, maybe we'll leave that there. I think this is probably a conversation that's not going away unless there's a fundamental shift in his performance or the injury thing does happen. But it's good to know that the Cubs have these players at AAA should the need arise, because we didn't even mention Owen Casey, Kevin Alcantara.
Seriously. And let's be honest. Like, Seiya Suzuki gets hurt pretty frequently. Catchers get hurt all the time. We might see Ballesteros.
Oh, it could collectively. You know, it's like my favorite thing to do, right? If
you're going to multiply
the three of them, even if the three of them are 90% likely to not suffer an injury, it's like, oh, that still leaves like a 40% chance that at least one will. All right, we can move to the game.
Yeah. Today's game, as always, is brought to you by Feldco. Feldco is the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family-owned and prides themselves on delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feldco offers the perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. Thank you to Feldco for sponsoring this week's game. This week's game is going to be, as it has at times, a little bit of like a discussion, but it's kind of just a fun opportunity to like talk about something random. So here's something I wanted to tee up to you, because we talked about this briefly on the phone the other day, and then I went, wait, we got to stop because this is a good conversation for the podcast. So in 2016, the Chicago Cubs were famously by far the best defensive team in Major League Baseball. Their 50.7 DEF, defensive WAR rating on Fangraphs, was 16 full points higher than the second best team, the Astros, and double the Giants in third place at 24.7. They were like light years ahead of every team defensively. It was a generational defensive squad somehow. But when I think about the 2025 Cubs, I look around the diamond and I see a lot of incredible defensive players. And I wanted to go position by position and sort of have you compare the defensive output, expectation for each of players, the primary ones from 2016 and from 2025. And then I'll add a little bit of like there's an X factor for 2016 that kind of explains a lot of this. Well, so Zobrist was actually the primary second baseman, and Addison Russell was the primary shortstop that year. And Javi Baez
was up by.
Yeah, I mean, he played primarily at third and second and short. Yeah, and so he's sort of a separate.
He's almost more the utility guy from that.
Exactly.
But yeah.
So, but let's go in order. So, Anthony Rizzo versus Michael Busch. How do you compare Busch's defense versus Rizzo, who was famously very good?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at this season versus the 2016, of course, Rizzo was very established at that point, very established as an elite defensive first baseman. Setting aside how much value that confers, I think if we're comparing the two guys, what you would say is Busch has the potential to be that good at first base. We have seen that ability, but you certainly wouldn't take 2025 Michael Busch's glove at first base right now over 2016 Anthony Rizzo's glove at first base if you were constructing a team. So I suppose if I feel that way, then I must believe that Rizzo is a decent clip better defensively.
Yeah, I think so. The charging on the bunts, the fact that he picked everything. Extremely flexible. Anthony Rizzo was, and I
hell of a
feel
pitcher.
Like this is true. He's like taller than Busch, and I feel like he was up and getting higher stuff. So I think Rizzo is the guy you take. Actually, this is the way this game was meant to be played. Who are you taking defensively? I forgot to mention that. Okay. Second base, primary second baseman in 2016 was Ben Zobrist. So Ben Zobrist versus Nico Hoerner. Who are you taking?
That's an easy one. Yeah, I mean, Zobrist was very good defensively. That was obviously the biggest part of his value was that he was not just able to play all his positions and hit, he was able to play all his positions quite well and hit. And that's what made Ben Zobrist. But Nico Hoerner got robbed last year, and seems like he's good to go again this year. It's Nico. Mm-hmm. He's one of the best defensive second basemen in baseball.
Okay, so we're 1-1, 2016, 2025. Third base is Chris Bryant versus Mystery Box. I don't know who the third baseman is.
And Bryant, as of 2016, if I remember correctly, was still reasonably good defensive at third base. It became clear quite quickly that he wasn't going to stick there long term, but I believe he
was still out pretty well that year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Trying to go less by because I could just look up the metrics. I'm just trying to, go by memory.
No, yeah,
I seem to recall. Yeah, I think we were still at least arguing with folks at that time that no, he can at least stay average at third. So right now you got to take that over what the Cubs have.
Okay. This is what I'm thinking, Addison, when this video's live, we'll have like a 2025 and then a tally mark and a 2016 and a tally mark, and we'll see how many end up on each side. Okay. This is actually my favorite one. There's two really, really good ones, but this is my favorite one. Shortstop. 2016 Addison Russell versus 2025 Dansby Swanson. This is, in my opinion, the toughest one. And for all the terrible things that Addison Russell turned into on the field and off since then, he was so good defensively in 2016. But Dansby Swanson is incredible as well. Who are you taking?
Yeah. And if it was Dansby Swanson 2 years ago versus Addison Russell like 2 years later, it'd be an easier one. But Addison Russell 2016, there was a reason people forget this. So Javi Baez quickly became one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball. People remember that. That's how we think of him as Cubs fans. But there was a reason that Addison Russell was starting at shortstop over Javi Baez at that time. And it's because Addison Russell was a freak defensively. It was unbelievable. And he was a guy coming up, as an aside, who was projected to land at third base because and there were questions about whether he could stick at third base defensively. So it was mind-blowing when we got to see how good he was defensively at shortstop. Way more highlight factor from him that year than we'll probably get from Dansby this year. But I just tend to think Dansby's so steady, just doesn't make mistakes, is going to rate out at that upper tier again. If I'm constructing the team, boy, God, that's tough. That is tough.
It's a really tough one.
You know what? I'm going to choose Dansby, but I'm going to hedge it by saying I'm doing it partly because it might be fun to see if 2025 ends up winning over 2016. So I'll pick Dansby.
I mean, there's a couple no brainers in a row. For example,
I was going to say there's some
Jorge Soler and Chris Bryant and Chris Coughlin.
No.
What's that word? Amalgamation.
Amalgamation. Yeah.
Amalgamation.
Yeah.
Leave it in.
Yeah.
Leave the struggle.
There's a no.
Yeah.
Multi-time Gold Glove winning Ian Happ. People like to dump on Ian Happ because they'll see him make one mistake or whatever, but it's like, man, look around the league in left field, and not only is he's almost always steady out there, he occasionally makes a great play and he makes great throws, and that's
great throws, great at coming in and sliding, solid.
Yep. So
easy another easy
field,
one. Just
let's see.
Yeah, I mean, it's PCA. Thanks, Fowler.
I don't even need
it was fun.
Dexter, listen, Dex improved greatly defensively.
Yep.
Remember, there were a lot of questions about what he could be with the Cubs in 15 and 16 defensively, and he improved. He was steady. He was better there than Jason Hayward was when he had to step in center field, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But PCA is PCA. So
yeah, PCA is PCA. Fowler, smaller center field at Wrigley helped, but I do remember having a heart attack every time he caught up
at his chest.
Fly ball at his chest. Do you guys remember? I mean, you remember that? Oh my
God. About that.
I was like, I stressed about that every time. Okay, here's the next fun one. I think the answer is clear, but I think I think the answer is very clear, but I want to talk about something about it. Jason Hayward in right field versus Kyle Tucker. Hayward, famously one of the greatest defensive right fielders of his generation.
At his peak.
And 2016 was arguably among his defensive peaks still. He, still right there. Kyle Tucker is a Gold Glove right fielder. I will say I'm a little underwhelmed by Tucker's right field defense. I haven't seen it from what we've been told.
You know what I wonder
to expect.
Okay, so same thing happened with Seiya. You remember when he came over? He was a multi-Gold Glove winner in Japan, and I think he was not as bad as people ripped on him for in right field. But that said, it's not like I watched him play and I was like, wow, that's a really good right fielder. I'm like, oh, okay, he's fine. That was how I felt.
I thought he was as bad as people ripped on him. He had some rough
either
ones.
way. He's had some of the most glaring biffs. Yeah. I think we know that we can agree on. But I do wonder I just wonder sometimes, like, does it depend on your other outfielders? Both of them, not just the center fielder, but like the way guys shift, because it's like this guy likes to cover this area, and you're coming from a different team where it just might be totally different the way guys are oriented. And so you develop a reputation that's paired a little bit with your ballpark, a little bit with your outfield teammates. I wonder about that. But that said, ultimately that one's an easy one for me because Jason Hayward, probably the best right fielder I've seen play at his peak. I'm trying to think of a better, Ichiro.
It's awesome. I used to love watching him camp under a fly ball when there's a runner tagging up, just seeing the gears start churning where he was like about to make that throw. You're like, oh my God, this guy's dead to rights. Like he just knew. You just knew. He was so good. I also, to give Kyle Tucker credit, I will say that it's been windy at Wrigley this year. A lot of really windy games. And also the sun has been a factor. There's been some weird start times. And I feel like I've seen him a lot of times with his glasses on, battling the sun and coming up with the catch, just not looking very pretty in the process.
Yes. You hear that a lot from guys who haven't played at Wrigley much, that those day games that turn into evening twilight where the sun, we know this because we're in right field often, when it comes down between the grandstand, it could be jarring if you're trying to track a ball. And so, that doesn't surprise me. And that's a good point. But yeah, so where did we land? That's one.
Well,
for
we have one more. We have catcher, Ross Montero Contreras versus Kelly Yanamaya. And I'll remind you that in 2016, Miguel Montero was dope
defensively.
No, but he was framing. He was good. He was framing like crazy, and framing value.
And David Ross
comes
was
into play
still
here.
very good.
And David Ross is still very good.
And the bit that they got from Wilson, he was probably
it was good.
Decent.
I went and looked it up. Yeah. It was positive. Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's who you got to choose. That group was put together primarily for defense and framing and sort of Kelly and Amaya both are like, they are regarded, and I think the numbers generally bear this out, as average to slightly above average catchers defensively. Like they're good. They're good, solid catchers in a way that we haven't always had as Cubs fans in recent years, where they like Wilson, it was always like, can he just get to average? Can it balance out?
Yeah.
Can the arm and the athleticism balance out with the framing and be average? Whereas these guys are just slightly above average, and that's good.
I mean, Miguel Amaya looks good. He's been better than he was last year.
Coming up, that was his stock and trade. He was a defensive catcher.
There was a time last year that it wasn't working, though. It was just like,
no. But then he started hitting in the minors, and I think they started pushing him, and he got hurt. And it's like, oh, actually, maybe the bat is actually the bat. I think his development just got not messed up, but I think it outpaced his defensive development. So I wouldn't be surprised if he takes more steps forward, actually, in this year and next year defensively.
Yeah. All right. So right now, for what it's worth, we are 4 for 2016, 5 for 2025, and I will give you the potential the potential to make it tied, or to swing it fully in a favor. There is the wild card factor, the X factor. There's Javi Baez as a utility man, and maybe any pitching that you want to talk about. Kyle Hendricks is a pretty good defensive pitcher, but whatever. Baez as that guy versus John Birdie, Vidal Brujan. Justin Turner's not really playing defense much. I guess he covered first base a little bit. Whoever else is going to be on the Cubs bench to provide defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little skewed because that's a pre-DH world back then. So we would see that guy come in a whole lot more. And so it feels like a very easy answer. But I mean, I would say too, because nowadays you don't care as much about having like a premium defender, that you don't have to have that on your bench as much. Now the Cubs do like to use that. I think they thought and hoped that Brujan and Birdie would combine to be that.
Yeah.
So got to go with Javi. If we're making that a spot, then got to go with 2016 Javi.
So guess what? It's tied 5-5.
Tied. That's
all crazy. The point of this is that was a historically great defense, and this defense comes close to stacking up, and in some key spots like center field, like shortstop being, at least it's neck and neck, second base, like this is a good defensive team. It is not currently rating as the top in baseball. It's in the top 10, but it's not at the top. I think this team has a chance to be really special defensively, and I think they're going to need to be, especially as the pitching injuries mount. And, frankly, we all have to be prepared for Carson Kelly to not be Barry Bonds for the whole season. So like maybe the offense comes back down a little bit too. So I just wanted to point that out, because we think about the 2016 team defensively as so excellent that it was like really striking to see how close this one is when you go player by player, position by position. And that was maybe our longest,
especially because that's not,
I thought that was worth it.
No, that's good. That was a good to tee up, because we haven't talked about the defense much, and we haven't had occasion to talk about it much in the last few years as being in this tier. So dig that. This is the Bleacher Nation Cubs podcast. It is brought to you by Ankin Law, 3126 million. Personal injury law. It's made personal. You're going to call them whenever you need anything. Scan the QR code if you're looking at the YouTube page. And I'm Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. We write at Bleacher Nation. You can read us there. You can rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to us next Thursday. It was good talking with you all. Hope you have a great weekend.